the dust devil that spun across the flatlands of Cherry Creek. Nevada carried with it the scent of death, and Theodora Pike knew it the moment she stepped onto her porch that scorching July morning in 1881. She had lived in this unforgiving stretch of desert long enough to recognize the signs, the way the air itself seemed to hold its breath before tragedy struck. But nothing could have prepared her for the sight of a man dragging himself across the hardpan toward her small ranch house, his fingers clawing at the earth with each agonizing inch of progress. Theodora dropped the basket of eggs she had been carrying and ran, her boots kicking up plumes of alkaline dust as she crossed the distance between them. The man's lips were cracked and bleeding, his face burned so dark by the sun that she could barely make out his features beneath the grime and dried blood. His clothes hung in tatters, and when she rolled him onto his back, his eyes struggled to focus on her face. "Water," he rasped, the single word more breath than sound. She did not hesitate. Theodora was a woman who had buried a husband 2 years prior, who had learned to shoot rattlesnakes from her kitchen window and deliver her own livestock when the veterinarian was too drunk to make the journey from town. She slipped her arms beneath his shoulders and dragged him toward the house, surprised by how light he felt, as though the desert had already begun the process of reducing him to nothing more than bone and sinew. The porch steps proved the greatest challenge, but Theodora had not survived 3 harsh Nevada winters and 2 drought-stricken summers by giving up when things got difficult. She pulled him up 1 step at a time, his head lolling against her shoulder, his breathing shallow and rapid. Once she had him on the porch, she propped him against the wall and ran inside for water. Her hands shook as she filled the tin cup from the pitcher, and she forced herself to take a steadying breath. She had seen men die of thirst before, had watched the way their bodies simply gave up, and she would not let this stranger become another marker in the Cherry Creek cemetery if she could prevent it. Theodora knelt beside him and lifted his head, cradling it in her lap as she brought the cup to his lips. "Slowly," she murmured, though she doubted he could hear her. "Drink slowly or you will make yourself sick." The water ran down his chin at first, his throat seemingly having forgotten how to swallow, but then his body remembered its most basic need, and he began to drink. She gave him only a little before pulling the cup away, ignoring his weak protest. Too much too fast would kill him as surely as no water at all. "Please, God," she whispered, brushing the matted hair back from his forehead. "Please let him live." Theodora Pike had not prayed in earnest since the day they lowered her husband into the ground, since the day she had screamed at the heavens and received only silence in return. But something about this broken man stirred a feeling in her chest that she thought had died along with Thomas, a desperate need to see life triumph over the cruelty of the desert. She gave him more water, watching his throat work as he swallowed, and when his eyes finally managed to focus on her face, she saw they were the color of sage in summer, gray-green and startling against his sun-darkened skin. "You are safe now," she told him, though she had no idea if that was true. She did not know who he was or what had brought him to her doorstep, whether he was running from the law or from something worse. But in that moment, with his head in her lap and his life hanging by the thinnest of threads, none of that mattered. The man tried to speak, his cracked lips forming words that would not come. Theodora shook her head and offered him more water. "Do not try to talk. Save your strength." She lost track of how long they sat there on the porch, the sun climbing higher and the heat becoming oppressive even in the shade. She gave him water in small amounts, and when she thought he could manage it, she wet a cloth and cleaned the worst of the dirt and blood from his face. Beneath the grime, he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps only a few years older than her own 24 years, with a strong jaw and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "Can you stand?" she asked finally, knowing she needed to get him inside before the heat of the day became unbearable. "I cannot carry you alone, but if you can help me, we can get you to a bed." He nodded, a barely perceptible movement, and Theodora positioned herself beside him. Together, with him leaning heavily on her shoulder, they managed to get him through the door and into the small bedroom that had once been hers and Thomas's. She helped him onto the bed, and he collapsed against the pillow with a sound that was half groan, half sigh. "I am going to clean your wounds," she said, already moving toward the kitchen to gather supplies. "Some of them look infected." Over the next several hours, Theodora worked with the focused efficiency of someone who had learned medicine from necessity rather than formal training. She cleaned the cuts on his hands and arms, the deep gash across his ribs that looked like it had been made by a knife, the rope burns around his wrists that told a story she was not sure she wanted to know. She applied salve made from desert plants and wrapped his injuries in clean linen, torn from one of her old dresses. The man drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes crying out in what she assumed was delirium, other times lying so still that she had to check to make sure he was still breathing. She spooned water into his mouth whenever he woke, and once she even managed to get him to eat a few bites of bread soaked in broth. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of amber and rose, Theodora finally allowed herself to sit in the chair beside the bed. Her back ached, her arms trembled with fatigue, and she realized she had eaten nothing all day. But she could not bring herself to leave his side, not when his breathing was still so labored, not when death still lurked in the corners of the room. "Who are you?" she whispered, studying his face in the failing light. "What happened to you out there?" The man's eyes opened, and for the first time she saw genuine awareness in them. He looked at her for a long moment, his gaze moving over her features as though committing them to memory. "Owen," he said, his voice rough as sandpaper. "Owen Jamison." "Theodora Pike," she replied. "You are in my home about 5 miles outside of Cherry Creek." Something flickered across his face, an emotion she could not quite name. "How long since you arrived?" "Since this morning." "You have been in and out all day." Owen closed his eyes and she saw his jaw clench. "They will come looking." "Who will?" But he had already slipped back into unconsciousness, leaving Theodora with more questions than answers. She rose and went to the window, pulling back the curtain to stare out at the darkening desert. If someone was coming, if Owen Jamison had brought trouble to her doorstep, she needed to be prepared. Theodora retrieved the Winchester rifle that hung above the fireplace and checked to make sure it was loaded. Then she locked the doors, lit a lamp, and returned to her vigil beside the bed. Whatever came next, she would face it the same way she had faced every other challenge in her life, with her spine straight and her resolve unshakable. The night passed slowly, marked by the sounds of Owen's restless sleep and the occasional call of a coyote in the distance. Theodora dozed in the chair, jerking awake at every creak of the house, her hand never straying far from the rifle. By the time dawn broke over the mountains to the east, she felt as though she had aged a year in a single night. Owen woke with the sunrise, and this time his eyes were clear, his breathing steadier. He tried to sit up, but Theodora placed a hand on his shoulder. "Slowly," she said. "You are still weak." He looked down at his bandaged hands, at the clean nightshirt she had managed to get on him sometime during the night, and something like shame crossed his face. "You did all this. Who else was there to do it? I do not even know you." Theodora met his gaze steadily. "And yet here we are. Now, are you going to tell me what happened, or do I have to wonder if I should be expecting company?" Owen was silent for a long moment, and she watched him weigh his options, decide how much to trust this stranger who had saved his life. Finally, he sighed and said, "I was a deputy marshal out of Carson City, was being the important word. What changed? I found out the marshal I worked for was taking bribes from a man named Silas Creed, letting him run his smuggling operation through our territory in exchange for a cut of the profits. When I tried to bring evidence to the territorial authorities, Creed found out. He and his men ambushed me on the road 3 days ago. Theodora felt her stomach tighten. The injuries, the rope burns. They tied me up and left me in the desert to die. I managed to work free of the ropes eventually, but by then I had no horse, no water, no idea which direction would take me to safety. I just started walking and praying I would find someone before the sun finished what they started. And you found me. Lucky for me. Unlucky for you, probably. If Creed thinks there is any chance I survived, he will send men to search. If they find me here, you will be in danger just for helping me." Theodora stood and walked to the window, her mind working through the implications. Silas Creed was a name she had heard whispered in Cherry Creek, always accompanied by nervous glances and lowered voices. He was not the kind of man anyone wanted to cross. "Then we need to make sure they do not find you," she said finally. Owen struggled to sit up, ignoring her protest. "No. I appreciate what you have done for me, Theodora, but I will not put you at risk. As soon as I can walk, I will leave." "And go where? You can barely sit up without looking like you are about to pass out. If you try to walk back into that desert, you will be dead within hours. Better me dead than you harmed because of me." Theodora turned from the window, her eyes flashing with an anger that surprised them both. "Do not presume to make that decision for me, Owen Jamison. I have lived on this land for 6 years, survived drought and disease and the death of my husband. I am not some delicate flower that needs protecting. I never said you were. Good. Because you are staying here until you are strong enough to travel properly, and then we are going to figure out how to make sure Silas Creed faces justice for what he did. Do you understand?" Owen stared at her, and despite the pain he must have been feeling, a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Yes, madam." Over the next week, Theodora kept Owen hidden in her house, venturing into town only once to purchase supplies and to listen for any gossip about strangers asking questions. She heard nothing alarming, and she began to hope that perhaps Creed's men had given up their search, assuming that if Owen had survived, he would have already made his way to the authorities. During that week, Owen's strength slowly returned. Theodora brought him meals and changed his bandages, and they talked in the long hours when there was little else to do. She learned that he had grown up in California, the youngest of 4 brothers, and had come to Nevada seeking adventure and purpose after his father's death. He had been a deputy marshal for only 2 years, but he spoke about the work with a passion that made it clear he had found his calling. In turn, she told him about her life, about growing up the daughter of a shop owner in Virginia City, about meeting Thomas Pike when she was 19 and following him to Cherry Creek when he decided to try his hand at ranching. She spoke honestly about the hardships of those early years, the way Thomas had struggled with drink after their first 2 attempts at crops failed, the loneliness of being one of the few women in a rough mining town. "How did he die?" Owen asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "He was trying to fix the windmill during a storm," Theodora said quietly. "Fell and broke his neck. He was dead before I could even reach him. I am sorry. So am I. Thomas was not perfect, but he was a good man when he was sober. I think if we had had more time, if the land had been kinder to us, things might have been different." Owen was quiet for a moment, then said, You could have gone back to Virginia City after he died. Why did you stay? Theodora considered the question, one she had asked herself countless times over the past 2 years. Because this is my home now. Thomas and I built this ranch together, even if it is just a few acres and a dozen chickens. Leaving felt like admitting defeat, like saying that the desert had beaten us. I could not do that. You are tougher than most men I know. She laughed, a sound that felt rusty from disuse. I am not sure that is a compliment. It is the highest one I know how to give. Something shifted between them in that moment. A recognition that the bond forming between them went beyond gratitude or simple kindness. Theodora felt it in the way her heart sped up when Owen smiled at her, in the way she found herself looking for excuses to be near him. It terrified her, this feeling, because she had not felt anything like it since the early days with Thomas, before the drink and the disappointments had worn the shine off their marriage. By the 10th day, Owen was strong enough to help around the ranch, insisting that he needed to earn his keep. Theodora protested at first, worried he would reopen his wounds, but she quickly realized that Owen was the kind of man who needed to be useful, who would go mad if forced to sit idle while there was work to be done. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side to repair the chicken coop that had been damaged in a recent windstorm, to clear the irrigation ditches that brought precious water from the creek to her small vegetable garden. Owen proved to be a quick learner and a tireless worker, and Theodora found herself relaxing in his company in a way she had not relaxed around anyone in years. One afternoon, as they took a break from work to eat lunch in the shade of the house, Owen said, "I need to send word to the territorial authorities about Creed. I need to finish what I started." Theodora felt her stomach clench, though she had known this conversation was coming. How? There is a man in Carson City, a federal marshal named Robert Hayes. He is honest, one of the few men I trusted when I was working as a deputy. If I can get word to him about what happened, he will investigate. You cannot go yourself. Creed will have men watching the roads. I know. But maybe I could write a letter, explain everything I know about Creed's operation and what happened to me. You could mail it next time you go into town. Theodora nodded slowly. That could work. But what happens after that? If Hayes investigates and arrests Creed, do you think Creed will not tell everyone that you are still alive? He will send men looking for you again. Let him. Once Hayes has my testimony and the evidence I collected, Creed will be too busy defending himself in court to worry about me. And if he is not, if he decides to come after you anyway, or worse, after me for helping you, Owen set down his plate and turned to face her fully. That is why I need to leave as soon as we send the letter. I will head north, maybe up to Oregon or Washington Territory. Put enough distance between us that no one will ever connect you to me. The thought of him leaving sent a sharp pain through Theodora's chest, but she forced herself to nod. That makes sense. I will never be able to repay you for what you have done for me, Owen said softly. You saved my life, Theodora. I will never forget that. She wanted to tell him that she did not want his gratitude, that what she wanted was for him to stay, to build a life here with her in this harsh and beautiful place. But the words stuck in her throat, held back by fear and the memory of too many losses. That evening, Owen wrote his letter to Marshal Hayes, detailing everything he knew about Silas Creed's smuggling operation, the corrupt marshal who had betrayed his oath, and the attempt on his own life. He sealed it carefully and gave it to Theodora, who promised to mail it when she went into Cherry Creek the following day. Once that letter is in the mail, there is no going back, she said. I know, but it is the right thing to do. Theodora rode into Cherry Creek the next morning, the letter hidden in her saddlebag. The town was busier than usual, with miners fresh from their claims spending their wages on whiskey and gambling, and Theodora had to push her way through the crowded Main Street to reach the post office. She was just handing the letter to the postmaster when she heard a voice behind her say, "Well, well, if it is not the widow Pike." Theodora turned to find herself face to face with a man she recognized from her occasional trips to town, though she had never spoken to him directly. He was tall and lean, with the kind of eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and he wore a gun on his hip with the casual ease of someone who knew how to use it. "Do I know you?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "Name is Frank Dalton. I work for Mr. Silas Creed, who you may have heard of." Theodora felt her blood turn to ice, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I know the name. What do you want with me?" "Nothing much. Just wondering if you have seen anyone unusual out your way lately. Stranger passing through, maybe someone looking for help." "No," Theodora said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I keep to myself mostly. Why do you ask?" Dalton studied her for a long moment, and Theodora had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her lies. "Boss is looking for a man who might have wandered into this area a week or so back. Deputy Marshal who stuck his nose where it did not belong. If you happen to see anyone matching that description, Mr. Creed would be very grateful for the information." "I will keep that in mind." Dalton touched the brim of his hat and walked away, leaving Theodora shaking with a combination of fear and anger. She finished her business at the post office and rode home as quickly as she dared, her mind racing with possibilities. Owen was working on repairing a section of fence when she arrived, and he looked up with a smile that faded the moment he saw her face. "What happened?" She told him about the encounter with Dalton, watching as his expression grew increasingly grim. When she finished, Owen set down his tools and rubbed a hand over his face. "They are still looking. I should have known Creed would not give up that easily. What do we do?" "I leave. Tonight, if possible. The longer I stay here, the more danger I put you in." "You are still not strong enough for hard travel. I will have to be." Theodora grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me. That letter is on its way to Carson City. Marshal Hayes should receive it within a week, maybe less. If you can stay hidden for just a little while longer, until Hayes has time to act, then Creed will have bigger problems than tracking you down. And if Dalton decides to search your property, if he comes back with more men, then we deal with it. Owen, you crawled to my porch half dead, and I made a choice to help you. I'm not going to let some hired gun scare me into sending you back out into the desert before you are ready." Owen stared at her, and she saw something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. "Why are you doing this? Why risk so much for someone you barely know?" The honest answer was that she did not know, not entirely. But part of it, the part that scared her most, was that in the short time Owen had been in her home, she had felt more alive than she had in the 2 years since Thomas's death. She had felt like herself again, like the girl who had once believed that life held possibilities beyond mere survival. "Because it is the right thing to do," she said finally, "and because I think you would do the same for me." Owen reached up and covered her hand with his touch warm despite the calluses on his palm. "Thank you." They went inside, and Theodora prepared dinner while Owen kept watch at the windows, both of them on edge and listening for the sound of approaching horses. But the night passed quietly, and by the time the sun rose the next morning, they began to relax slightly. Over the next several days, they were careful to keep Owen out of sight whenever Theodora had to go outside or tend to her animals. He spent most of his time in the house, reading the few books she owned and helping with indoor chores. It was a strange sort of domesticity, and Theodora found herself growing accustomed to having him there, to the sound of his voice, and the way he always made sure to have coffee ready, when she came in from the morning chores. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Owen said, "Tell me about your favorite memory of this place." Theodora thought for a moment, then smiled. "The first winter we were here, it snowed. Not much, just a few inches, but it was so beautiful. Thomas and I went outside and just stood there in the middle of it, watching the flakes fall and cover everything in white. For a little while, all the struggles and the worries disappeared, and it was just us and the snow and this feeling that maybe everything was going to be all right. Was it?" "For that moment, yes. That is all we can really hope for, is it not? Moments of peace and beauty in between the hard parts." Owen nodded slowly. "My favorite memory is the day I was sworn in as a deputy marshal. My father had died the year before, and I had been drifting, not sure what I wanted to do with my life. But standing there taking that oath, I felt like I had finally found my purpose. I was going to be one of the good men, someone who made a difference. You are one of the good men, Owen. What you did, standing up to corruption even though you knew it would cost you, that took real courage. Lot of good it did me. I am hiding in a ranch house while Creed is probably still running his operation. For now, but that will change once Marshal Hayes receives your letter. You have to believe that." Owen reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing small circles on her skin. "I do believe it, mostly because you believe it, and I am starting to think you are one of the strongest people I have ever met." Theodora felt her breath catch, felt the warmth of his touch spreading up her arm and into her chest. "Owen, I know I should not say things like that. I know I should be focused on staying alive and bringing Creed to justice. But I cannot help it, Theodora. These past 2 weeks with you, they have been the best weeks of my life despite everything. You make me want things I have no right to want." "What things?" He stood and pulled her to her feet, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "A future, a home, someone to build a life with." "I know it is too soon. I know I have no business feeling this way about you when I am bringing nothing but trouble to your door. But I cannot lie to you. I am falling in love with you." Theodora felt tears sting her eyes, felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. "I am falling in love with you too. And it terrifies me because I cannot lose someone again, Owen. I cannot bury another person I care about." "You will not have to," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I promise you, Theodora, I am not going anywhere. We are going to get through this, and then I am going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that love does not always end in loss." He kissed her then, and Theodora felt the last of her resistance melt away. She kissed him back with all the longing and fear and desperate hope that had been building in her chest. And for the first time since Thomas died, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved a second chance at happiness. The next morning brought a knock on the door that sent both of them scrambling. Owen grabbed the rifle and positioned himself where he could cover the entrance while Theodora approached cautiously. "Who is it?" she called out. "Name is Robert Hayes. I am a federal marshal out of Carson City, looking for Owen Jamison." Theodora exchanged a glance with Owen, saw the shock and relief on his face. She opened the door carefully, keeping herself positioned to block the view inside. Marshal Hayes was a man in his 50s with iron-gray hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of years spent outdoors. He tipped his hat to Theodora and said, "I apologize for the intrusion, madam. I received a letter a few days ago that led me to believe Mr. Jamison might be in this area." "Is he here?" "How do we know you are who you say you are?" Theodora asked. Hayes smiled slightly. "Smart woman. Owen, if you are listening, I am wearing the watch you gave me for my birthday 2 years ago, the one with the inscription from that poem you are always quoting." Owen lowered the rifle and stepped into view. "Marshal Hayes. Good Lord, son, you look like hell. Your letter did not mention how close you came to dying out there. I had help, Owen said, moving to stand beside Theodora. This is Theodora Pike. She saved my life. Hayes nodded to her with genuine respect. Then I owe you a debt of gratitude, madam. Owen is one of the best men I have ever worked with. What are you doing here? Owen asked. I did not expect you to come yourself. When I read your letter and realized the scope of what you had uncovered, I knew I needed to act fast. I have been building a case against Silas Creed for months, but I did not have enough evidence to move against him. What you provided gave me everything I needed. Creed and his associates, including Marshall Bennett, were arrested 2 days ago. Owen stared at him. They are in custody. Federal custody in Carson City, awaiting trial. We also rounded up several of Creed's men, including one Frank Dalton who had been searching this area. You are safe now, Owen. Both of you. Theodora felt her knees go weak with relief, and Owen caught her elbow, steadying her. It is really over. The immediate danger, yes. There will be a trial, and Owen will need to testify, but Creed will not be able to threaten anyone from behind bars. They invited Hayes inside and spent the next several hours going over details of the case, with Owen providing additional information about Creed's operation, and Hayes explaining the charges that would be brought. By the time the marshal prepared to leave, the sun was setting and Theodora felt as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. You should come back to Carson City with me, Hayes said to Owen. You will need to give a formal statement, and there are people who will want to hear your story. Owen glanced at Theodora, and she saw the question in his eyes. Can it wait a few days? I would like to make sure everything here is secure first. Hayes followed his gaze, and understanding dawned on his face. Take a week. Report to my office by the end of the month. He turned to Theodora and added, Thank you again, madam, for everything you did. This territory needs more people like you. After Hayes left, Owen and Theodora stood on the porch watching the dust from his horse fade into the distance. The desert was painted gold by the setting sun, and the air had that particular quality of stillness that comes at the end of a long, hard day. It is really over, Theodora said softly. The running and hiding part, yes. But there is still the trial, and after that, I will need to figure out what comes next for me. Theodora turned to face him, her heart pounding. What do you want to come next? Owen took her hands in his expression serious. I want to stay here with you. I want to help you build this ranch into something that can support both of us. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you in my arms every night. I want to marry you, Theodora Pike, if you will have me. She felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were happy tears this time. Yes, yes, I will marry you. He kissed her as the sun sank below the horizon, and Theodora felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness and peace that she had not known was possible. They had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, had built something real and lasting out of near tragedy, and she knew in her bones that this was the beginning of something beautiful. The week passed in a blur of preparations. Owen helped Theodora with the heavier ranch work that had been neglected during his recovery, and they talked late into the night about their plans for the future. Owen would testify at the trial, and then he would return to Cherry Creek permanently. He had some money saved from his years as a deputy, enough to purchase additional livestock and make improvements to the ranch. When it came time for him to leave for Carson City, Theodora rode with him as far as the main road, reluctant to let him out of her sight even though she knew he would be safe with Marshal Hayes. I will be back in 2 weeks, Owen promised, leaning down from his horse to kiss her. 3 at the most if the trial runs long. I will be counting the days. So will I. I love you, Theodora. I love you too. Be safe. She watched him ride away until he was nothing more than a speck on the horizon, then turned her horse toward home. The ranch felt empty without him, but she kept herself busy with work, knowing that the time would pass faster if she stayed occupied. True to his word, Owen returned 17 days later, riding up to the house just as Theodora was finishing the evening chores. She dropped the bucket she was carrying and ran to meet him, and he swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until they were both laughing. "How did it go?" she asked when he finally set her down. Creed and Bennett were both convicted. "They will spend the next 20 years in prison, longer if they are not careful. It is really over, Theodora. We are free to live our lives without looking over our shoulders." That night, as they sat together on the porch watching the stars, Owen pulled a small box from his pocket and handed it to her. Inside was a simple gold band, worn smooth with age. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "She gave it to me before she died and made me promise to give it to the woman I loved. I know it is not fancy, but—" "It is perfect," Theodora whispered, slipping it onto her finger. "When do you want to get married?" "As soon as possible. Tomorrow, if the preacher in Cherry Creek is available." She laughed. "Give me at least a week to make a dress and tell the few friends I have in town. I want to do this properly." They were married 10 days later in the small church in Cherry Creek, with Marshal Hayes traveling down from Carson City to serve as Owen's witness and the postmaster's wife standing up for Theodora. It was a simple ceremony, but as Theodora stood beside Owen and spoke her vows, she felt a joy so profound it nearly took her breath away. After the wedding, they returned to the ranch and began the work of building their life together. Owen proved to be everything Theodora had hoped for in a partner, someone who shared the load without needing to be asked, who listened when she talked about her plans for the ranch, who made her laugh even on the hard days when nothing seemed to go right. They expanded the chicken operation and added a dozen head of cattle, gradually transforming the struggling ranch into a modestly profitable enterprise. Owen took on carpentry work in town when they needed extra money, and Theodora started selling eggs and vegetables at the weekly market. It was not an easy life, but it was a good one, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. 2 years after their wedding, Theodora gave birth to their first child, a son they named Samuel. Owen cried when the midwife placed the baby in his arms, and Theodora knew she had made the right choice in loving this man who had crawled to her porch half dead and ended up stealing her heart. Samuel was followed 3 years later by a daughter named Rose, and then 2 years after that by another son they called Daniel. The ranch house grew crowded with children and noise and laughter, and Theodora often found herself pausing in the middle of her work to marvel at how much her life had changed. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen found her standing on the porch at sunset, watching the children play in the yard. He wrapped his arms around her from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "The day you arrived. How close you came to dying out there in the desert, and how different my life would be if I had not heard you in time. I think about that too sometimes. I think about how lucky I am that of all the places I could have ended up, I found my way to you." Theodora turned in his arms and kissed him. "We found our way to each other, and I would not change a single moment of it, not even the scary parts. Not even Frank Dalton showing up at the post office," she laughed. "Well, maybe that part, but everything else was worth it." As the years continued to pass, the ranch prospered. Owen and Theodora expanded their cattle operation, and eventually purchased an additional 50 acres from a neighbor who was moving back east. Samuel grew into a serious young man who loved the land as much as his parents did, while Rose inherited her mother's fierce independence, and Daniel showed an early aptitude for working with animals. On Samuel's 18th birthday, Owen deeded half the ranch to him, ensuring that the work they had built would continue into the next generation. It was a moment of profound satisfaction for Theodora, seeing her eldest son standing beside his father, the two of them discussing plans for the upcoming season with the easy familiarity of true partners. That evening, after the birthday celebration had ended and the children were in bed, Theodora and Owen took their customary walk around the property. It was something they had done every evening for years, a chance to check on the livestock and talk about the day without interruption. "Do you ever miss it?" Theodora asked as they paused by the creek that gave the town its name. "Being a lawman, I mean, the excitement and purpose of that work." Owen considered the question, then shook his head. "No, I thought I might in the beginning, but I found something better here. I found purpose in building something lasting, in raising children who will make this world better, in loving you. That is worth more than any badge ever could be. I am glad you feel that way, because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You will never have to. I intend to spend the next 50 years annoying you with my presence." She laughed and leaned into him, and they stood there in comfortable silence, listening to the sound of water moving over stones and the distant call of night birds. This was her life now, Theodora thought. Not perfect, certainly not easy, but hers in a way that nothing else had ever been. When Rose turned 19, she announced her intention to become a teacher, and with Owen and Theodora's blessing, she traveled to San Francisco to attend normal school. It was hard letting her go, but Theodora understood the need to pursue your own path, to find your purpose beyond the place where you were born. Daniel, on the other hand, showed no interest in leaving. He took over the management of the cattle operation when he was 22, proving to have a natural instinct for the business side of ranching that neither Owen nor Samuel possessed. Together, the three men turned the Pike Jamison Ranch into one of the most successful operations in the Cherry Creek area. By the time Theodora turned 50, she was a grandmother 3 times over, with Samuel having married a woman from town and started his own family. She watched her grandchildren play in the same yard where she had once stood washing clothes and wondering if she would survive another year alone, and the contrast filled her with a gratitude so deep it sometimes brought tears to her eyes. Owen had aged well, his hair gone silver but his body still strong from years of physical labor. They still took their evening walks, though they moved more slowly now, and Theodora treasured those quiet moments together as much as she had when they were newlyweds. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of red and gold, Owen reached for her hand. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" he asked. "When I tried to thank you for saving my life, I said a lot of things that day. You said I was safe, that I did not need to be afraid anymore." Theodora smiled. "I remember. I had no way of knowing if that was true, but I needed you to believe it. You were right, though. I was safe. Not just from Creed and his men, but safe in a deeper way. Safe to be myself, safe to love and be loved, safe to build a life worth living. You gave me all of that, Theodora. You gave me the same thing. Before you arrived, I was just going through the motions, surviving but not really living. You reminded me what it felt like to hope again, to want things beyond mere survival." Owen lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Then I think we both got what we needed that day. Providence brought us together. Or sheer dumb luck," he laughed. "Maybe both." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. Somewhere in the house behind them, Theodora could hear the sound of her grandchildren laughing, and she felt a profound sense of contentment settle over her. This was what they had built together, she and Owen. Not just a successful ranch or a comfortable home, but a legacy of love and perseverance that would outlast them both. They had taken the broken pieces of their separate lives and forged them into something beautiful and lasting. When Daniel married at 25, the celebration lasted 3 days and included nearly everyone from Cherry Creek and the surrounding ranches. Theodora and Owen watched their youngest son dance with his new bride, and Owen leaned over to whisper in Theodora's ear, "One more wedding to go. Think Rose will ever settle down? Knowing our daughter, she will probably marry some progressive lawyer or politician who supports women's rights, and good for her. As long as he treats her right, I will be happy." Rose did indeed surprise them all by marrying a professor she met in San Francisco, a man who supported her ambitions and encouraged her to pursue her dream of opening a school for girls. They moved back to Nevada and settled in Carson City, close enough that Rose could visit regularly, but far enough away that she could build her own life. By the time Theodora turned 60, she had 7 grandchildren and was expecting her 8th. Her hair had gone completely white, and her hands bore the marks of decades of hard work, but she had never felt more satisfied with her life. She and Owen still ran the ranch together, though increasingly they left the day-to-day operations to Samuel and Daniel. One winter evening, as they sat by the fire, Owen suddenly said, "I never told you what I was thinking about when I was dying out there in the desert." Theodora looked up from her mending. "What do you mean? That last day, before I found your ranch? I was so far gone, so certain I was going to die, and all I could think about was how stupid it was that I had spent my whole life looking for the right woman, and I was going to die alone without ever finding her. But you did find her. I found you. And it was worth every terrible moment that came before, just to have this life with you." Theodora set aside her mending and moved to sit beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Owen Jamison. I have loved you since the moment you looked at me with those sage-colored eyes and asked for water. And I love you, Theodora Pike Jamison. I will love you until the day I die, and probably beyond that too." They sat together in the firelight, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that neither had dared to hope for. Outside, the desert wind howled, but inside they were warm and safe and surrounded by the evidence of their love. As the years continued to pass, Owen and Theodora gradually stepped back from the active management of the ranch, content to spend their days tending the garden and spoiling their growing collection of grandchildren. They had worked hard for decades, and now it was time to enjoy the fruits of that labor. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party that brought together friends and family from across Nevada. There were speeches and toasts, stories told and retold until everyone was laughing, and through it all, Owen and Theodora sat together holding hands like the newlyweds they still felt like in their hearts. Samuel stood to give a toast, raising his glass high. "To my parents, who taught me that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every single day. Who showed me that the best partnerships are built on mutual respect, hard work, and unwavering support. May we all be lucky enough to find what they have found together." The crowd echoed his sentiment, and Theodora felt tears slide down her cheeks. She looked at Owen and saw that his eyes were damp too, and they shared a smile that held 25 years of shared joys and sorrows, triumphs and struggles. When Theodora turned 68, she began to slow down in ways that worried Owen. She tired more easily and sometimes forgot things that had always come naturally to her. The doctor in Cherry Creek assured them it was just age catching up, but Owen watched her with increasing concern, remembering all too well how quickly life could change. One morning, Theodora woke to find Owen already dressed and sitting beside the bed, watching her with an expression that made her heart clench. "What is wrong?" she asked. "Nothing is wrong. I just wanted to look at you, to memorize this moment in case I ever need to call it back to mind." "Owen, you are scaring me." He took her hand and pressed it to his lips. "I am sorry. I have just been thinking about how fragile life is, how lucky we have been to have so many years together. I do not want to take a single day for granted." Theodora sat up and cupped his face in her hands. "Then let us make a promise to each other. No matter how many days we have left, whether it is 1 or 1,000, we will live each one fully. We will not waste time on regrets or fears. We will just love each other and be grateful for what we have built." "I promise," Owen said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. They kept that promise faithfully. Even as age continued to slow them down, they found joy in the simple things. Morning coffee on the porch, visits from grandchildren, the satisfaction of watching the ranch continue to thrive under Samuel and Daniel's management. They told each other often how much they were loved, and they never let a disagreement fester into something larger. When Theodora turned 70, the whole family gathered for a celebration that lasted an entire weekend. There were now 12 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren, and the house overflowed with noise and laughter and love. Theodora sat in her favorite chair and watched the chaos with a heart so full it felt like it might burst. Owen appeared at her side with a cup of tea and a knowing smile. "Overwhelming, is it not? Wonderfully so. Look at what we made, Owen. Look at this family." "I am looking. And I am thinking about how it all started with you pouring water down my throat and praying I would not die on your porch," she laughed. "That was a memorable introduction. The best one I could have asked for." He knelt beside her chair, his joints protesting the movement but his determination overriding any discomfort. "Thank you, Theodora. Thank you for saving my life, for loving me, for building this beautiful life with me. Thank you for being the kind of man worth saving, worth loving." He kissed her then, in front of their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and Theodora heard someone start to clap. Soon the whole room was applauding, and when they finally broke apart, both of them were laughing and crying at the same time. As the celebration wound down and family members began the journey back to their own homes, Rose pulled her mother aside. "You look tired, Mama. Are you feeling all right?" "I am fine, sweetheart. Just a little overwhelmed by all the excitement. Promise me you will rest tomorrow. No working in the garden, no trying to help with chores. Just rest." Theodora promised, though she knew she would probably break that promise the moment she saw something that needed doing. Old habits were hard to break, but as it turned out, she did rest the next day, and the day after that, because something in her body had decided it was finally time to stop. She woke one morning unable to rise from the bed, her limbs heavy and unresponsive, and Owen knew immediately that something was very wrong. The doctor came and went, his expression grave, and when Owen asked him to speak plainly, the old man sighed and said, "Her heart is giving out. It could be days or weeks, but I do not think it will be longer than that." Owen felt the world tilt beneath him. "Are you certain?" "I am sorry, Owen. There is nothing more I can do except make her comfortable." After the doctor left, Owen sat beside Theodora's bed and held her hand. She was awake but weak, her breathing shallow. "I heard what he said," she whispered. "It is all right, Owen, I am ready." "Well, I am not. I am not ready to lose you. You will never lose me. I will always be with you, in every sunrise over the desert, in every memory we made together, in the faces of our children and grandchildren." Tears streamed down Owen's face. "It is not enough. I want you here with me, for another 50 years at least." Theodora smiled weakly. "We got 32 years together, my love. That is more than many people ever get. We filled them with so much love and joy that I regret nothing. Nothing except that I have to leave you." The family gathered over the next few days, filling the house once more with the evidence of the life Theodora and Owen had built together. Each person took their turn sitting with her, sharing memories and saying goodbye, and through it all, Owen never left her side. On the fourth day, as the sun was setting, Theodora opened her eyes and looked at Owen with perfect clarity. "You remember what you promised me?" she asked. "That you would not let me lose another person I loved." "I remember. You kept that promise. We had a lifetime together, Owen. A beautiful, perfect lifetime. It still is not long enough, I know, but it is what we got, and it was wonderful." She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had left. "Promise me you will not spend what time you have left grieving. Promise me you will keep living, keep loving our family, keep finding joy in every day." "I promise," Owen said, though his voice broke on the words. "Good. Now kiss me one more time." Owen leaned down and kissed her gently, and when he pulled back, he saw that her eyes had closed and her breathing had eased. She died peacefully an hour later, surrounded by everyone who loved her, with Owen holding her hand and whispering words of love into her ear until the very end. The funeral was held on a clear autumn day, with what seemed like half of Nevada in attendance. People came from Cherry Creek and Carson City, from surrounding ranches and distant towns, all of them wanting to pay their respects to a woman who had lived with quiet dignity and unwavering strength. Owen stood at the graveside and listened to the preacher speak words of comfort and hope, but all he could think about was the first moment he had seen Theodora's face, the way she had looked down at him with such determination in her eyes. She had saved his life that day, but more importantly, she had given him a reason to live it fully. In the months that followed, Owen struggled with the grief of losing his partner. The ranch felt empty without her, and he often found himself turning to share something with her before remembering she was gone. But he had made her a promise, and Owen Jamison had always been a man who kept his word. He threw himself into spending time with his children and grandchildren, teaching the young ones to ride and sharing stories of their grandmother. He continued to take his evening walks, though now he walked alone, and he talked to Theodora as though she were still beside him, telling her about his day and the small triumphs and challenges of life. 2 years after Theodora's death, on what would have been their 34th wedding anniversary, Owen took one final walk around the property. He visited every place that held memories of their life together. The porch where she had saved him, the garden where they had worked side by side for decades, the creek where they had stood on so many evenings and talked about their dreams. When he returned to the house, he found Samuel waiting for him with a concerned expression. "You were gone a long time, Pa. I was starting to worry." "No need to worry, son. I was just saying goodbye." "Goodbye to what?" Owen smiled. "To this place in a way, not literally, of course. The ranch will always be home, but I realized something today. I have been so focused on missing your mother that I forgot to be grateful for the time we had. That changes now." And it did. Owen lived for another 8 years, growing old surrounded by love and laughter. He never remarried, content to carry Theodora's memory in his heart, but he did not let grief consume him. He lived fully and joyfully, just as he had promised her he would. On a warm summer evening when Owen was 83 years old, he settled into his chair on the porch to watch the sunset. Samuel found him there an hour later, a peaceful expression on his face, his hand resting on the arm of the empty chair beside him where Theodora had once sat. Owen Jamison was buried next to his wife in the Cherry Creek Cemetery, and their shared headstone bore a simple inscription: two souls who found each other in the desert and built a life of love. The ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through Samuel's line, and then to his children and grandchildren. The story of how Owen crawled to Theodora's porch half dead from thirst, and how she poured water down his throat and prayed became a family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. Rose ensured that her parents' story was preserved, writing it down in careful detail, so that future generations would know where they came from and what it meant to love someone completely. She spoke of how her mother had chosen courage over fear, how her father had proven that redemption was possible, and how together they had built something that would outlast them both. Years later, when the ranch celebrated its 100th anniversary, dozens of Pike Jamison descendants gathered to honor the legacy of their remarkable ancestors. They stood on the same porch where Theodora had once knelt beside a dying man, and they raised their glasses in a toast to love, perseverance, and the kind of faith that changes lives. The desert winds still blew across the flatlands of Cherry Creek, Nevada, carrying with them the whispers of the past. But on that particular piece of land, carefully tended and deeply loved, those whispers spoke of hope and second chances, of two people who had found each other when they needed it most and built a love story that would inspire generations to come. In the end, Owen and Theodora's story was not just about survival or even about love, though it was certainly both of those things. It was about the profound truth that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected places, that mercy and compassion can change the course of a life, and that love, when given freely and completely, has the power to transform everything it touches. Their legacy lived on in the laughter of children playing in the yard where they had once worked side by side, in the thriving ranch that bore their names, and in the hearts of everyone who had been fortunate enough to know them or to hear their story. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, not through violence or cunning, but through simple human kindness and an unwavering commitment to each other. The Pike Jamison Ranch stood as a testament to what two people could build when they combined their strengths and supported each other through every challenge. It was a place of hard work and honest living, of family dinners and shared dreams, of roots that ran deep into the Nevada soil and branches that stretched toward the future. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the desert wind carried the scent of sage, and the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, those who walked the land swore they could feel the presence of Owen and Theodora, still keeping watch over the legacy they had created, still loving each other across the divide between life and death, still proving that some bonds are too strong to be broken by something as simple as mortality.